How much do CAT adjusters actually make? You've heard about adjusters making big money, but after expenses and splitting fees with the firms, how much actually ends up in your pocket? Okay, in this video, we're going to cover adjuster earnings, gross and net, and how we come up with that, right? And realistic expenses per deployment, how many claims you can actually handle depending on your experience level, and then common mistakes that cut into your profits. And we'll also talk about the implications of variable income and how to maximize your earnings. But before we get into this, let's talk about errors and omissions and general liability insurance for adjusters. And what is that, right? So errors and omissions is when you get sued or you get accused of being negligent on a claim, whether you were or not. General liability is if you cause damage to the insured's property or you hurt them or somebody, when you're out working. General liability, hospital bills, fixing things, etc., right? The only company that exclusively serves the independent claims industry is CPLIC. That's how they say it, right? CPLIC. We have a free guide over at cplic.net/adjustertv that talks about all the different kinds of insurance that you need to have as an adjuster, including auto insurance, right? Commercial auto insurance. So go to cplic.net/adjustertv and check that out. So I was an independent adjuster for 20 years and I made a really, really great living at it. And I now train adjusters to help people through disasters and make a great living doing it. So let's talk about your gross earnings per claim after the split. So what's the split, right? So when you're working for an IA firm, the IA firm has a contract with the insurance company. You are an independent contractor that works for the IA firm. The IA firm, when you do a claim, will present an invoice to the carrier for the work that you did, right? They take a split of that for their overhead and for profit or whatever for them, and then they give the rest to you. 60-40, you usually get a majority of it. I've heard terrible rumors of 50-50 splits, which I don't think is fair. It can go the other way as well, right? 70-30, 75-25. When I was back in the field, it was 65-35 typically for me, and kind of bumped down and bumped up depending on who I was working for or what the circumstances were. So for small claims, after your split, we'll say the 60% for small claims might be $120 per small claim. And this includes phone closures, which might be $90, right? Or where they have like one or two sections of, wood privacy fence blown down and they're just really small, below $2,500 claims, right? Medium-sized claims, which could be elevation of siding, or we have something between $5,000 and $10,000, generally speaking. So that'd be $285, roughly average your split before taxes and before expenses on these. Large loss, totaled roofs, totaled siding, wildfire, large loss, water, etc., right? So $660 average for those. Could go up a lot higher than that, especially if you get your hands on commercial claims. But we're going to talk mostly about residential with this stuff. So the typical claim distribution that you might sort of expect, and again, these numbers could vary pretty wildly depending on your year, the types of storms that you get deployed to. But you could say maybe half, 40 to 50% might be small claims, 30% might be medium, and then 20% of the remaining 20% might be large. It could be that there's a lot more of the mediums, and it's the distributions is just 10 to 15% on either end for the small and the large ones. Just all depends. But we're going to kind of run with this just to be slightly pessimistic, right? So your average claim after the split came up with $277.50 per claim if you do a full year of all those claims and you have that 50-30-20 distribution. How does that shake out as far as like what you can earn in a year? Well, the number of claims that you close is going to be the number one factor. All other things being equal, forget about the size of the claim. Don't worry about if you get over in this neighborhood with a bunch of cracker boxes and your buddy ends up in this neighborhood with a bunch of $800,000 houses and he's saying, oh, look at these fee bills are huge. Don't worry about that. All we're worried about is closing as many claims as possible, right? So an average adjuster, I think, honestly, should realistically be sort of expected to close between 400 and 600 claims per year, so around 500 claims. Top adjusters are going to be 800 plus, 1,200, claims per year, right? And again, the distribution, we're not going to be upset that we didn't get as many of the large claims. We're after that volume number, right? Because where we're making our money is on that volume piece, right? Typical season is going to be from April to October-ish, right? Could flexible on either end of that. The early season is going to be a lot of sewer and drain backup, right, from heavy early spring rains, especially in the south. You start getting a little bit of hail and wind down in the south, early season, March, April. And then late spring, early to midsummer is our bread and butter, which is hail, right? And in the 20 years that I was an adjuster, I didn't have a single year that I didn't have a hailstorm. That is how I made the vast majority of my money. I would say 85+% of all the earnings that I ever made as an adjuster was on hail claims. Even in years where there was no hurricanes, there was no wildfires, there was no sewer and drain backup storms. It was just like my first hailstorm, get another 2 or 3 hailstorms after that, and I've made my money. I've closed my 600, 700, 800 claims, right? Later in the summer, start getting into the really hot, dry months. We're looking at the hurricane season really kicks up mid-August through the peaks in the middle of September, and then kind of tapers off out through early November. They say it starts in, the end of May, but if you look at all the historical major landfalling hurricanes, they all have letters that are in like the HIJKLM, right? Sort of zone in the alphabet, right? So the Hugos, the Lauras, the Ians, the Katrinas, right? So on and so forth. Irma. And then after that, or concurrent with that, mid to late summer, you have the western wildfire season, or even eastern, just depends on, how dry things are, how much of a drought we've got going on. So that's kind of how the year shakes out. The typical storms you get at certain times of the year, and how many claims you should be expected to do, and how many claims you should shoot for. Anything more than 1,200 claims in a year, that's a 12-month year. You're working most or if not all of the year after that. Either that or you're super duper efficient where you're doing 12 or 15 a day. But that's above and beyond 1,200. That's a lot. Then you can have an impact on that, obviously, by doing large loss or commercial stuff and still make more money by doing fewer claims. But that's kind of beyond the scope of this video. So let's talk about your regular monthly expenses on deployment. So on deployment, as a traveling cat property adjuster, field adjuster, your primary expenses are going to be your lodging and your fuel. I picked Overland Park, Kansas, kind of a typical suburb. It's a little bit on the pricey end, right? But it's, you're not going to be able to control where you get deployed. So we're going to use Overland Park, Kansas. It's centrally located suburb of Kansas City as our example. Typical hotel, a stay bridge for a month, about $100 a night, right? So $3,000, $3,100 a month. You could probably talk to the management at that hotel and ask for a monthly or weekly rate that would knock that down, right? But we'll say $3,000 a month, $2,500 to $3,000 a month, depending on how good you are at negotiating. Those major places all have Extended Stay America, Stay Bridge, Candlewood, they should all have monthly rates. The Hyatt, Embassy Suites, and places like that are not. They may have a weekly rate, but they really they're going to be charging you for weekends and all that kind of stuff. So you really want to stay in extended stay places if you go with the hotel route. Airbnb, I looked at some rooms to rent, which I've done quite a bit of, even with my wife, renting a room in somebody's house. It worked out great. Usually you have a way to get in and out of the house without having to go through the main living area where they are, right? It's like the basement's finished out and there's a kitchenette kind of thing. $800 to maybe $1,200 or $1,500 a month. Half or less than a hotel is probably the way to go, I think. If you're really looking to save money. Keep in mind that if you want to sort of bunk up with a bunch of buddies and you rent a whole house and it's $5,000 a month, like through Airbnb, keep in mind that you guys aren't all going to be staying there the same length of time, right? You might be there for 2 months, but all your other 4 buddies were only there for 1 month, right? Well, now you're paying $5,000. So, because they're not going to keep paying after they've left, right? So just keep that in mind. Fuel is the other kind of wild card. It's the other sort of thing that you spend a lot of money on. You're going to be filling up every couple of days. Every 2 to 3 days, you're going to be refilling your vehicle right back up again. Fuel price is hard to nail down. It just depends on a lot of factors, but we'll just say between $3 and $4, $3.50 a gallon. I would say probably averaging about 100 miles a day, right? So we'll just say, around 500. You might even budget even $1,000 a month for gas, especially if things get expensive. Summers, traditionally, the holiday driving season, like the summer travel season where everybody jumps in their vehicles and goes to Yellowstone and goes to Niagara Falls and goes and visit family and all this kind of stuff. So fuel prices go up because of the supply and demand in the summertime, right? So it probably is going to be more expensive. Other common expenses that you have are going to be travel to and from, right? The storm. We'll say maybe you got one night, you're far enough away that you've got to have one night stay at a hotel unless you've got like an iron rear end where you just drive 16 to 18 hours straight, which, that's cool and everything. Be careful. It takes drifting off for a count of 3 and you're in the ditch or in the median in the oncoming traffic if you fall asleep. Okay. So it's worth it to spend 60, 80 bucks at a Motel 6 just to get some shut eye and then roll in before lunch the next day, right? $1,000 fuel and maybe a hotel. Food strategy is kind of an interesting one. It's really, really hard to eat healthy when you're on CAT because all of your time is dedicated to working and you don't really have much or any time, especially during, the most of the week, to cook your own food. You can get creative with that. I've found ways to take a frying pan and stop at the grocery store on the way home from my claims and buy a skirt steak or whatever and just throw that in some butter in a pan and then just stand over the stove and eat that, right? If you stop at fast food restaurants, if you make that your sort of strategy for eating, you're going to feel like crap and you're going to gain a lot of weight, right? And it can get expensive, especially these days. Believe it or not, it used to be, McDonald's was super cheap, the dollar menu, whatever happened to that, right? Restaurants, same deal. You're usually going to get a lot more food than you would normally serve yourself. And if you go to restaurants every night, and if you like Mexican food like me, it's hard to resist the chips and the salsa, right? And it's maybe a particularly rough day. You order a couple of beers, you get the queso bowl, you get the burrito. Next thing you know, you've got a gut bomb. And if you have any more work to do that night, you're going to struggle with it because all of your blood and everything is in your digestive system trying to tackle what you just punished it with, right? You could, if you are a savvy cook and you want to do some prep, take some work, a couple hours on a Sunday afternoon, but buy a bunch of chicken breasts, cook those up. And, if you're going to stay in a stay bridge or whatever, you're going to have a way to cook stuff. And, Ziploc bags and grab one and throw it in you have a little mini cooler or whatever for your vehicle and take that with you for lunch or have them for dinner or whatever. Or you could do Factor or HelloFresh. We do Factor and 4 nights a week, I think we have those. It's 90 seconds. Probably the simplest way to do this is just to go buy a bunch of TV dinners that you like because they're going to be smaller. They're not going to be super duper high calorie. They're going to be a little bit industrial, right? And it's not going to be like a home cooked meal or whatever, but it's food and it's not going to be way too much food. It's going to do the trick. So food, again, it's pretty challenging. Technically, you're not really going to be spending more than what you have to eat no matter where you are, right? Food, you have to eat every day, no matter where you are, right? So you have to figure out a way to keep that to where you're not spending a lot of extra money on it. Gear and supplies, sometimes things break, sometimes they get stolen, sometimes they fail for whatever reason, right? Phones, laptops, you run out of Cougar Paw pads, you run out of printer paper, printer cartridges, SD cards can fail. They can get corrupted, right? Keep in mind that you're going to have to spend money on that stuff sometimes, right? Vehicle repairs above and beyond your regular scheduled maintenance, right? You might get a flat tire or have a blowout or something like that where you got to replace that tire, or maybe you have to replace all the 4 tires for some reason. Broken windshields, right? A broken windshield is a safety hazard because especially if it's bright sunshine and you're driving into this, early morning sun or late afternoon sun, and all those cracks and everything in your windshield can kind of dazzle you with weird reflections and stuff. You might miss the light, right? Or you might miss somebody walking across the street in front of you. So cops will pull you over for a broken windshield. You got to get that repaired, right? Safe Light guy can come out and do that. Takes them an hour, maybe 2 hours. They can come and do that in the parking lot when after you get home from your claims or during the day or Sunday afternoon off or whatever it is. AC might go out and you're in Houston in August, right? And you have to have air conditioning. You will absolutely suffer. You'll melt into a puddle and you'll end up stinking and being covered and drenched in sweat. So when you go up to the insurance house, you look like you just walked out of a stinky swimming pool, right? If you get in a car accident or you have some reason, you have something happen to your car where your water pump goes out, whatever happens, right? And you need a rental car, right? That's an expense as well. So if we put all this stuff together, your Airbnb, right, we'll say $1,200 a month, your fuel, your food, which again, it should be a wash with what you normally spend, but it may be that you spend a little bit extra. We're just going to assume $600 a month, $200 a week for groceries, kind of a deal, right? Maybe a one night out to eat. Gear and incidentals, office supplies, vehicle incidentals, right? We could add all that stuff up to about $2,800, right? Just kind of in that ballpark, $3,000 a month for this particular example. So we'll say $21,000 for the entire season, a 7-month season of expenses, right? And what we're going to get into next is to show you that this doesn't change even if your income changes. And that's one of the beautiful things about this work, right? So let's talk about your annual earnings, sort of the realistic-ish examples. Average adjuster handling 500 claims at $277 a piece, looking at maybe making about $139,000, $140,000, $130,000 to $140,000. Pull that $20,000 off, that $21,000 off. Your net before tax is $117,000, and then maybe your taxes peeled off of that. You're taking home between $90,000 and $100,000 as your net, right? Part of that money obviously is going to go to your regular home expenses. Everything else needs to go into savings if that's the way you want to go with it, which I recommend. A top adjuster, right? Let's say this person has, a few years in a row where they just consistently knock out 1,000 claims a year. Same average price per claim, right? We're looking at $277,000 instead of $138,000. Same expenses, right? So you pull $21,000 off the top of that, and you've got $256,000, as your net before tax. This is where it gets really important to have a really good CPA. You might be spending $50,000 to $60,000 or more in taxes, depending on how good your CPA is. But still, that's $200,000, $180,000 that you're going to take home for you, right? Into your home expenses. If your home expenses go up because you feel like you're making more money and you can buy a better house and buy better cars and whatever, then this is going to be a wash, and you might as well just do 500 claims a year, right? And live below your means. The more you can live below your means with this kind of thing, the more money you're going to be able to save. Obviously, this isn't Dave Ramsey. This is adjusting 101, right? And again, a really important factor with all this stuff, and the thing that makes this kind of challenging and something that especially CPAs that aren't familiar with our industry will have trouble with. Try to go get a mortgage, right? And you're not able to show like, this is how much money I make with pay stubs, like monthly. You're like zero money for these 4 or 5 months, right? And then you're making a bunch, $200,000 over these 7 months, and then you're back to zero again. Makes it a challenge. So we have to talk about the variable income factor. But before we do, I want to mention our sponsor, Hague. These guys are a forensic engineering firm that has set kind of the gold standard for damage identification caused by wind and hail primarily. So they're kind of the damage ID experts. The insurance industry uses them. The big major carriers use them as the standard for when you're standing up on a roof with a contractor and you're pointing at a hail hit. Hague said that's a hail hit. That's what we're looking for, right? This is not hail damage according to Hague. Not only do they do that and have resources for you to be able to, like picture books, PDFs, digital files, and all that kind of stuff, tools like shingle gauges, etc., but they also have certifications for adjusters and roof inspectors, right? So the Hague Certified Reviewer is sort of a desk adjuster centric program that teaches you construction, damage ID, and then there's exact maintenance stability tracks that you can take in there. That's a really, really great program for kind of getting up to speed as a desk adjuster. And then of course, there's sort of premier thing that they're known most for, at least in our industry, is going to be their Hague Certified Inspector. And they have several levels of the Hague Certified Inspector, which makes you a damage ID expert and a sort of a construction expert especially for roofing. They have a master level certification that they just came out with, which is pretty amazing. Go check them out at hageeducation.com. To buy any of this stuff at their website, use code AdjusterTV for a discount. All right, variable income. How do we manage variable income, right? Keeping in mind, obviously, like we said, you have concurrent sort of home expenses, your mortgage, utility, family expenses, and things like that, right? I'm going to tell you to have a dedicated account just for claims work where money comes in and money goes out, right? So any direct deposit stuff that you get from your firms when you onboard with them, that you give them this account. It's a special account. It's got your name on it. It doesn't have to have a business name or whatever. Matthew Allen checking at this bank, right? And it might be a separate bank from your regular bank, especially if you have an LLC. If you can even separate your banks, that looks even better. Any spending that you do for your claims work, including, but certainly not limited to, fuel, hotel, your office supplies stuff, all your gear, your training, licenses, all that stuff comes out of this account, right? Exclusively. If you go out to dinner, you're not using this card. You're using your home card. There's no reason that an adjuster would have meals expenses over here because you're not doing sales, right? You're just going and probably by yourself, sitting there eating Mexican food at the restaurant and then going home, right? So you're not taking meals off of that. You're not using this for meals or anything personal at all, right? Go to a movie, right? It's raining out and you can't work. There's nothing else for you to do and you want to take a little break, go see a movie. You're not using this account. You're using your personal accounts, right? And then I would have a separate savings account for taxes. So every time I got paid, I would transfer, we'll say 25% into this account and just let that stack up. So every time you get a paycheck, in particular, if you're 1099 and they're not withholding on you, you have to do this because you have to pay quarterly taxes. And then you're going to have to, depending on how you estimated your taxes out, you probably still have a bill at the end of the year, right? If you're W-2, I'm probably still going to pull 5% or 10% and stick it in there anyway, just in case that I owe at the end of the year. So I have something there to pay the $7,000 or the $12,000 or whatever it is, that they didn't quite get my withholding correct on, right? Especially since you're going to have multiple states that you have to file in, even if you don't have to pay taxes in all those, you may have to pay taxes in some of them, right? Get a good CPA. It's incredibly important. Again, save aggressively during storm season to make all this worth it. Have a goal, right? I want to be debt-free in 5 years and I want to, I've got a side hustle that I want to turn into my main business and I don't want to do claims forever. 10 years, 3 years, whatever it is, right? Have a goal for that money. Profits profits being like just money that you have tends to make things a lot easier and it gives you resources and it gives you options, right? This is one of the things that wealthier people, I think, kind of understand. Having resources makes the things that are emergencies or other things that you decide that you want to do or help other people out with, it makes those things a lot easier to do and it diminishes their impact on your lifestyle and your savings, right? When you have those resources there to spend, if that makes sense. The key way to protect your earnings is to always be working, right? You can take a break, after storm season, take a couple of weeks. I wouldn't take much longer than that, 2-3 weeks, and start doing something to pay your utility bills, to pay your mortgage, to buy food, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to touch this. Whatever's left over after taxes and paying, my home bills during storm season, all that stuff is taken out of this. Whatever's left over here is maybe have another account where that money just goes and just sits, some sort of interest-bearing, money market or whatever it is, right? That money's not going to, I don't want to touch that money because I've got a goal. I want that money to have a job for the future for me somehow. For your side hustle, for the thing that you're going to do, again, it's easy to get, easy to quit work, retail, driving for Uber Eats, bartending, driving for Pizza Hut, right? You shouldn't really feel like anything's beneath you because nothing really is beneath you. Ego and pride, setting that aside, doing what you have to do in the service of some future goal, right? It's discipline is delayed gratification, right? So in other words, you, instead of going and buying jet skis and spending a bunch of money and just, sleeping in and not working and just waiting for the next storm season and just saying, you know what, I deserve to take the whole winter off, right? That's gratification. If you can delay that to where you've achieved your goals with this money first, then it'll be even sweeter then. Common mistakes that kill your earnings: buying brand new vehicles on debt, financing new cars, buying everybody in the family a new car, 2 new cars, one each for the kids, wife's new car, your new brand new pickup truck, buying an RV, all that stuff. Buying anything on, toys, anything that you can buy on debt, if you prioritize having fun and like rewarding yourself with nice things, then you are not going after your other goals over here. And if you're always wondering why you can't seem to get ahead, it's because these things are dragging you down, right? Don't overspend on non-essential gear or spend it all on non-essential gear, right? So in other words, you don't need a drone, not now. You may in the future. There may be in the off season. There is drone work that you can do, but you invest in that once you've got that work lined out and you get your Part 107 and all that kind of stuff. If you're gonna buy those kinds of things, try to find a way for them to make money for you, right? And it may be that you can go do work for beast360.com with your drone and make enough money to cover your bills through the off season, and then shut the app off as soon as you get deployed for your first sewer backup storm in March the next year, right? Then you protected this money that we keep talking about over here in this invisible pile. Things that are going to take away time, right? Time is money. We always say it's incredibly important. It's even more important, I would argue, in this business, because every moment that you can be working on your claims, you're making money. And any moment that you're not doing that, you're distracted by something else, then you're not, right? That includes, medical appointments and dentist appointments and vet appointments and vaccinations and all that kind of stuff that you could have done over the winter. And you now have to do it in the summertime, right? 2 hours at the dentist, and that's 2 hours that you're not on a roof closing a claim, right? You're wasting money. You're losing money there. Do that stuff in the off season, right? Vehicle maintenance, the same thing. Essential vehicle maintenance. Spend the money to get your vehicle up to current with your tune-ups, transmission, all that stuff, right? Make sure that you've got new tires. Your car is ready to go. And the only thing that could possibly happen to it is that you get into an accident or some unforeseen thing fails, right? Or you get a broken windshield. Unforeseen things, unpredictable things are the only things that we really want to have drawing you away from doing your claims work, right? If you have, and I know a lot of adjusters that do this, you've got rental properties, maybe you have Airbnb stuff at home, right? And you're always on the phone with that stuff. People are calling you, you're always in your computer doing email, updating your website, and maybe you have to like sneak away on weekends or 1 or 2 days during the week to deal with stuff that's going sideways at home. Hire somebody. Don't do this, or hire somebody to take care of that stuff for you and only come to you in an absolute emergency, right? Because why you can't do these two things at the same time. And I would argue that if you have that kind of a business, then you need to put 100% of your effort into doing that and forget about this claim stuff, okay? Because you're not doing yourself any favors by trying to do both, especially because these are both could be probably pretty full-time jobs. This is for sure a more than full-time job, 12 to 16 hours, 7 days a week for as long as you can stand it, right? How do we maximize earnings? We are more efficient. We have great customer service. We have high technical accuracy on our files, right? That means that fewer of our files are going to reopen. That means that anytime you have to do a reinspection, especially on your own work, that is more time to spend on a claim that you already closed, where you could be spending time on another claim that will pay you money, right? A new claim. Like we talked about previously, with the volume of claims being the most important thing, this is where the rubber meets the road with that, right? So being more efficient, your production, which is your cycle time or how fast you're able to close claims, your customer service and your file accuracy all serve customer service. And the better you are at those things, the more your iFirm is going to lean on you as a resource. And if you add on to that being very reliable, you communicate, your manager's not waiting days to hear back from you, you're likable, you have a great positive attitude, you're saying yes 100% of the time if possible, if not 98% of the time, even if the assignment or the deployment sounds sucky, and it's going to happen, the better. The more claims you're going to end up with at the end of the year, right? You build up a good reputation, it equals more deployments and more claims assignments, which translates into getting you 600, 500, 600, 800, 900, whatever, 1,100 claims per year, which is where you're going to start making great money. You don't have any control over the claims that are assigned to you, right? If you start trying to ask or be like, I'm only going to go work on that storm if I get put into neighborhoods where the houses are all $500,000 and up, coverage A, they're not going to put you to work. They want you to do whatever that they give you, right? And so that's why we have that distribution of small, medium, and large size claims. And that's why We're not concerned about the small, medium, large. We're only concerned about that grand total number of closed claims per year. That's where we're going to make our money, is having a high volume. So when you focus on our processes, our customer service, our efficiency, our file accuracy, those are the things that are going to move the needle the most on getting us to that number, right? Makes sense? So knowing how much money you can realistically make is only useful if you can actually get deployments consistently. And the truth is, getting hired isn't as simple as just getting a license. There's a very specific process and set of skills that firms are actually looking for when they hire adjusters. And because understanding exactly what makes firms call one adjuster over another adjuster is such a huge topic, I made an entire video going in depth on exactly how to position yourself to get that first call. And you can check it out right here. And as always, thank you so much for watching and have a great storm.